at what point does this pricing stop? When does it become ridiculous? I now can't afford any of the high-end watches I've got.
What we're saying is not that these watches have always been unobtainable. There was a time when they were obtainable, and that time has suddenly gone. And why did that happen? Because that's not fair.
We're not prepared to stand there and say, this is the best watch in the world, when the reality is half of us now can't afford them.
You don't mind paying a lot of money for something that's desirable, but when it's disproportionate, when you feel you're no longer getting value, that's when the love affair stops.
The conversation today actually spawns from a conversation we had last night at the hotel. More specifically, the conversation stemmed from two very, very specific circumstances, didn't it? The first was our writings and studyings from Watches and Wonders, where I was writing about the IWC Ingenieur that you'd seen.
Yep, I liked it.
We liked it, and I'm writing the feature, which is up on the magazine, and I'm writing the price, £10,500, for what is ostensibly a stainless steel tool watch. And then I couldn't help myself, in brackets after I write, when did these prices become the norm? Closed the brackets and carried on writing.
That's more than a Rolex.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So fast forward to a few days ago when myself, Anthony, Mario and John were in London. And this was ostensibly a visit to go to the Seiko and Grand Seiko boutique. In the afternoon, we went to several of the very, very high-end pre-owned watch shops. And as you may well know, my Grail watch has for some time been a 1968 Rolex of a specific model. And sadly on this afternoon, I found out that I probably couldn't get one. And that was quite sobering. In fact, it was actually a little bit annoying.
But we thought, never mind.
We thought, never mind. But we'll come back to that, because I think it's important to say why it riled me that day.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, but we'll come back to it. But you said, we're walking up this beautiful Victorian arcade, and we find a shop that has got almost the entire collection of Apollo Speedmasters, including Apollo era ones and Apollo special edition marked ones. And what was there in the window?
There was that thing you've been looking for, a 1968 Speedmaster. And I said, Richard, this is destiny. I think I said, this is destiny. This is your watch. Fate has led us to your watch.
I have rarely fallen in love with a watch so quickly. Now, it didn't look vastly different to my 2011 Speedmaster, I'll admit. But it was just the fact that it was the year before Apollo, so it's Gemini era, which is very cool. And it was in immaculate condition. Well, I mean, a few knocks, but it was looking pretty good. So we all guessed, it was myself, John and Anthony, and we all guessed the price.
And I thought, it's obviously not going to be anywhere near as expensive as the Rolexes we've seen, but it is London, so, you know.
So I guessed 10 to 12. John guessed, I think, about the same, wasn't it?
About the same. Ever the optimist, I said, well, this is London. Probably it might be as much as 15. Yeah. But, you know, I was hoping I'd be wrong. And I was. That's the good news.
Yeah, so we went in to inquire, and we were slightly alarmed at the fact that the watch was over £20,000.
So that means that my guess, which was the most pessimistic guess, was still way wrong. Not just wrong, but just out of the ballpark wrong. And that is coming from someone, that's the highest guess. I thought that is the most expensive. No, I didn't think that's the most expensive. I thought that is what it would be.
And the irony is that the price you were out was almost exactly the same price as a brand new Rolex Oyster. To put it in perspective, we were that, and I was so far out, I could have bought a Rolex Submariner brand new. Of course, you can't buy a brand new one, but if I could have bought a brand new one, that was the cost I was out. I mean, we're not, we mix in the industry every day. We talk watches every day. And even we were caught out by these prices.
That's an Omega, it's a Speedmaster, it's not a Rolex, it's not a Patek, it's not...
And I think this was the conversation last night. And we halfway through the conversation last night, we became so kind of enrolled in it that we thought, I tell you what, let's do this again tomorrow. And we just want to open up the debate. And we'd love people to comment and come back to us on this. Because we genuinely feel, at what point does this pricing stop? When does it become ridiculous? Because we were saying last night, I was saying to you, I now can't afford any of the high-end watches I've got.
And yet, in the past, one could. And I think it's important to set this, and you've done some brilliant maths here, to set this in a historical context, because what we're saying is not that these watches have always been unobtainable. There was a time when they were obtainable, and that time has suddenly gone. And why did that happen? Because that's not fair.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, back in 1994, I clearly remember it because I've got the watch on in my wedding photos in 1995. I bought my first Rolex Air King. It was a 14,000.
Brand new?
Brand new from the dealer. It had to be ordered, but it came within a matter of weeks.
Yeah.
And it was £999. And I remember the gentleman who sold it to me in the Rolex dealership in Northampton. I'll never forget his name. It was Mr. Craghill.
Mr. Cracker.
Sounds like something from a Dickens novel. And he said to me, he said, you're lucky because, you've gone in for the one Rolex that's under £1,000. Now, let's not be wrong. I was a mid-ranked civil servant at the time. £999 on a watch was a shed load of money for me. But it was affordable. And it was affordable to someone like me as a mid-ranking civil servant.
We've calculated that's the equivalent of what today, roughly?
Well, I did. There was a wizard program online, which no doubt the mathematicians out there will say was completely wrong, because it took into account inflation rates and how prices have changed and how the world is spinning at a different speed, and it took everything into account. And the wonderful computer told me that would be the equivalent of that watch costing £2,544 today.
A Rolex. So obviously today you can't buy a Rolex for
£5,300. If you go onto the Rolex website today, that's what they start at. And for that, you're getting an absolutely basic oyster. It is effectively what my Air King was. My Air King was the entry-level Rolex.
Except it's double the price of what your Air King was.
I don't understand how this has become the norm. And we get watches through to test all the time. And one watch we've just recently had through is the new Luminox. It's called the Master Carbon. Now, as my dear friend Anthony knows, I'm a great fan of Luminox, Tracer, Knight. I love all these Spec Ops, polymer, carbon, tritium style watches. I've got a big collection at home. And I've always thought Luminox was slightly more expensive than it needed to be, because when you compare it to, for example, a Knight or a Tracer, there's not really a huge difference, other than the fact the Navy SEALs use it and there's a bit of kudos attached to that. So again, we had the new Luminox Master Carbon through, and the CEO of the company does a guess, somebody else does a guess. The closest guess to the price of this watch was £400 out, because this watch is £1,000. Now, I know we're saying, and the crazy bit is now, actually, the way watch prices are, we're saying £1,000. Well, that's not too bad. Yeah, if we were talking about stainless steel high-end tool watches, maybe it's not too bad. We're talking about here what is, to all intents and purposes, a plastic watch.
Phenomenal.
Everybody's prices just seem to be exploding, and I've got myself now into this kind of spiral of ranting a little bit.
Well, I think it's not a rant, because let's deal with the facts. So a cumulative price increase, so going back to that Air King, between 1994 and today, of 154.49%.
Yeah.
Is that for real?
It is.
Wow.
It's, and as anybody who knows me looking at this video will know, I'm not a blessed mathematician. but I think we as the buyers, we as the purchasers of these watches, we as the owners of these watches, who want to aspire to buy more, we have to somehow collectively as a group draw a line in the sand and say we're not prepared to support these brands anymore. We're not prepared to stand there and say this is the best watch in the world, when the reality is half of us now can't afford them.
From the watchmaker's point of view, of course,
Yeah.
from the companies, I mean, well, they're laughing, aren't they? Because they're testing the market, and what they would say is, well, there are people out there who are willing to pay that price, so that's what we're going to sell them for. If there weren't enough people out there who were happy to pay that, then they wouldn't be
I
selling
know.
that much. And you know, given that you can't get hold of a Rolex, the only conclusion, and given the sort of like grey market prices, the only sad, inevitable conclusion is that these prices are only going to rise because we've not reached that saturation point yet where there are watches hanging around waiting to be sold because people are finding them too expensive.
Well, I've got a friend, and the thing as well is, you're right, because there is still this almost irrational demand for them. I've got a friend who's just bought his first Rolex Explorer, and he bought a 2021 Explorer at £400 over list price, just so that he could have it now. I mean, it's only when you actually play back what I've just said there, you start to think, this is bonkers.
It is, it is. But if you look at it from our point of view, you, Richard, were closely involved. You're the father of the Phalanx watch, and what does that sell for roughly?
$699.
$699. That's what you can get a Phalanx for. Now imagine we decided to sell it for double that, or even slightly less than double that. Say we sold it for 1,500, and we had a queue of people from here to France saying, "Can I get one? Can I get one?" You know what we'd be thinking? We'd be thinking, "Well, let's make it 2,500. Let's make it 3,000." And then if we made it 3,000, and that queue's not got any smaller, we'd be thinking, "Well, let's make it 4,000 then."
Yeah, I know.
So
there's this very, very fine line between the commercial needs of the organisation and the instinctive needs that cut in. The fact that if you can sell it for X amount of money, then why wouldn't you?
I think we're in this really interesting position, aren't we? Because, like, you know, with what we do here at WatchGecko, we're selling watches, and we're also watch fans and we're buying them. So I think we sort of see it from both sides.
Yeah.
But my overriding thought as a watch collector is, to be honest, enough is enough. It has got too much. You don't mind paying a lot of money for something that's desirable, but when it's disproportionate, when you feel you're no longer getting value, that's when the love affair stops.
Yeah.
And you look to a brand that doesn't necessarily make you pay less, but gives you more value. Yeah. And I think that's the point.
I'd love to buy another Rolex. I like the brand. I mean, I know we criticise the brand, I know, but jokingly within ourselves, we always say, "Oh, you know, Rolex, roll eyes and up to heaven" type of thing. But I love them. I mean, Watches and Wonders, I would love to buy that titanium Yachtmaster. That to me was one of the stars of the show. I can't buy that. I can't buy that. I can't buy the watch. And I think this is why I'm at this, my frustration has bubbled to a point now, because I've dropped off that cliff into the category of customer that now can't necessarily afford what I want.
I get you. I think, though, you know, we should go back to where we started, which is Rolex is one thing, Speedmaster is a huge name, but where did we start? We started with the IWC Ingenieur at more than £10,000. So what we're seeing is that drop-down effect, because Rolex has always been Rolex, so you can always put them almost in a different category, but now we're seeing that trickle down, not just to IWC, but also Luminox.
Yeah, yes.
Where does it stop?
Absolutely.
Where does it stop? Because it's...
our G-Shock's going to be £1,000 this time next year.
Yeah.
Where does it end? But what's interesting, though, when I was doing my research prior to this, we do a little bit of research prior to these chats, and I was looking at the Omega and Breitling prices. Now, the cheapest Omega is £4,300. And that's not
what do you get for
that's
that?
Not the DeVille, by the way. I've deliberately kept this at the steel tool watch sort of category. Otherwise, it would be slightly meaningless comparisons.
Yeah.
So we're looking at a Railmaster, one of which we have in the office at the moment, and this is a blindingly good watch. It's £4,300. Now, yes, again, I hear myself, and my wonderful wife chastises me for this. I'm about to say £4,300 isn't bad. Because let me stop you.
Your 1994 Air King, don't forget, let's go back to what we said a while ago, is worth the equivalent of about £2,500 a day. So it still means that your basic Omega now is nearly double the price of what an Air King would have cost back then.
Absolutely. It's crazy. And I was about to say, you know, £4,300 is not too bad. As I said earlier in the video, when did £10,500 for a steel tool watch become the norm? When did the world end up in the position it's in, where I would be actually saying £4,300 isn't bad. But however, you look at Breitling, the Super Ocean 42, an absolutely superb dive watch, £2,800.
£2,800. Yep, that's.
I don't have a problem with. So how can they do it?
Yeah.
Or what are they doing differently? I mean, yeah, we all know Rolex do use metal that is of a higher quality than Omega and Breitling. That's a given. There's enough written about that. Nevertheless, I cannot believe there is £8,000 just about difference between an IWC Ingenieur and a Breitling Super Ocean.
Breitling is a brand I love. It's to be commended. £2,800. Yes, it's good value. But let me keep on bringing you back to 1994 when your Air King was about £1,000. What would you have felt if Breitling had been putting out their Super Ocean at, say, 1,100, which is what this is the equivalent of with the inflation of prices? Watch companies are basically inflating prices beyond inflation. Now, that's not a news story in itself. Anyone who probably owns a house has suffered in the same way. But I think it is getting silly, and I think it needs to stop.
Yeah, I do. I mean, we noticed just the other day, from a very personal perspective, the household contents insurance with the watches on it. Massive hike up, because my Rolex Explorer 2 is now worth 12 grand.
Yeah.
You know, you think to yourself, and the other observation we made last night is does this borderline madness on the prices make you wear them less or more?
Probably to me it makes no difference because you wear them. But I can see how some people would react in one of two different ways.
Yeah, so when we were going down to the aforementioned day in London, I had, before I left to go to the train, my Rolex on a Bond NATO strap.
Mm-hmm.
And before I left the house, I had changed that to something else. Because I thought, I'm on the underground, my hand's up hanging on, you can't, you know,
I see what you mean.
Is this, and I thought, well, hang on, this, and you know, all the way down the train, I'm thinking, this is crazy because the watch is so expensive, because I can't afford to buy another one now.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just not take it to London. That in itself is a terribly sad testimony.
Do you think twice about that myself? I don't know, it's got to stop. Do you think if the watches are cheaper, they'll be less desirable or not?
I think they'll be less desirable to a certain demographic of customer who are driving these prices up, is my cryptic answer to that.
Wow. I get exactly what you mean.
You know where I'm coming from, don't you? Yeah. Because it's the demographic of customer that we have slightly moaned about before, who are now, for example, the Rolex target market. And we've discussed this one already, so we won't bore you again with it. So I think, and then you hear Rolex post their best year ever again.
And the thing is, we're annoyed about this, and we are really annoyed about it, but we are too...
We were last night.
We still are now. But we're two grumpy old men. Yeah. What's it like for people who... I mean, at least we had the chance to buy these Rolex and these watches when we could. At least we benefited from a time when this wasn't the case. But people who are in a fortunate position of being younger than us, you know, unless something drastic happens, they will never really have these watches that we've been fortunate to own. And that is a crying shame because, you know, there are people out there with a huge amount of passion who want to explore these iconic brands and are locked out of it in a way that we never were. Not because we were better off with them, but because our money was able to buy more watch back then.
Yeah, I agree. We've spoken about it before, so I won't drone on, but one of our fellow authors is in exactly that position at the moment. Actually probably could afford the Rolex Explorer he wants, but it's such an alarming amount of money at his stage in his life. He's thinking, do I really need to do this? Hence the reason he was up in the aforementioned Meadowhall the other day trying on the Tudor Black Bay 54.
Yeah, which is more or less, I mean, my head is swimming with numbers and maths.
It's about £3,000 or just under something.
But that's close to, you know, the equivalent purchase you made in 1994, isn't it?
Absolutely, well put, yeah. Very well put. It is similar. And that's the position I was in. You know, I think he would look at the Tudor Black Bay 54 or the 58 and think, you know what, yes, it's still a lot of money when I'm earning X amount and I'm this age, but you know what, I think I could stretch to this and I think I would be so proud of it. Of course, the poor chap wants the Rolex Explorer and the frustration is, do I blow half my savings on this watch? Or does common sense cut in and I don't get it and I buy the Tudor? But then do I always look at the Tudor and wish?
Yeah.
And I feel the watch companies are putting a lot of the younger buyers in this terrible position. And to be blunt, social media is not helping, because there's Rolexes everywhere on young persons' wrists.
Well, look at some of the releases that we saw at Watches and Wonders,
Absolutely.
which are aimed at probably that demographic you were cryptically alluding to earlier on.
Yeah, well, we watched a very interesting documentary the other day. It's on Channel 4 and it's called 24 Hours in Police Custody. Anthony's thinking, where the hell am I going with this?
Yeah.
And it was a chap...
I wasn't on it, was I? Thank God for
not that
that.
episode,
Right.
no. And there was a chap on it who was a really nasty piece of work, criminal, and he loved to be photographed on Instagram and TikTok and all the other channels that I'm far too old for with his Rolexes. And he was constantly hanging off the back of cars with various Rolex. I mean, admittedly, the ones probably most of us wouldn't want to wear, but very high-end ones. So when he was finally arrested and his property was seized as part of the arrest, the Rolexes were fake.
I was going to say, because my next question was going to be, what's that police auctions website? Because like that could be a solution.
They weren't real. That's how important it was to him to have the brand in gold and whatever.
So do you think he knew they were fake, or did he think
No,
they were
yeah,
real?
he absolutely knew they were fake.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, but it was just, I thought to myself, there's something fundamentally wrong if Rolex, nothing to do with the fake market, but if that's the demographic of buyer, there's something fundamentally wrong in it.
There is. There is.
So you're right, we're grumpy old men.
So I like, having said that we're grumpy old men, I'd like to look on the positive side of this. So for me, the positive side, I mean, there aren't many, but for me, there is one positive side. And the positive side is it does make watch aficionados start to look at other brands that previously they wouldn't have considered because they've just automatically gone down the Speedmaster route or the Rolex route or whatever. And now I think brands that are genuinely offering value, are genuinely offering a bit of history and an intriguing story behind them at a good price point, are getting people's attention and wrist time and airtime that they probably wouldn't have done previously.
Very well said. I would draw people's attention, for example, to one of the brands we love, Formex. Yeah, absolutely superb watches, beautifully crafted, beautifully designed. There's nothing over £2,000.
I think for me, you're absolutely right. I mean, for me, is the risk is that's sort of pretty much how Luminox started as well. I mean, they have always been on the expensive side, but the way that brands tend to climb is they start off by producing something, they get a degree of popularity, and there's just that market force. They think, well, surely now we'll be able to sell it a little bit more, and so I guess, as a watch enthusiast, you almost have to continually reinvent yourself to spot what these up-and-coming brands are. And that's the second thing I was going to mention, as well as, and we'll do a whole other video on this because it's a fascinating topic, as well as giving brands that you don't know about a little bit more airtime and wrist time. There are many brands out there where you think, well, will that be the next Rolex one day? Will the prices of these watches increase? But I think that's another topic for another time, because there are all sorts of watches that...
If you'd like to hear that, we'd quite like to do that.
Yeah.
Watches. I mean, obviously we have to caveat that we're not allowed to give investment advice, but it'd be interesting to know what brands you should maybe get now.
Yeah.
That would be a way to phrase it.
Absolutely.
Buy now before you can't.
Yeah, because the story that you've told about the Air King is a case in point. You could buy then, you can't now.
Yeah. Well, we don't have any definitive answers, but we just thought you might enjoy sharing the chat with us. We don't know what the solution is, other than to plea to the large watch companies to wake up and smell the coffee and realise that they're losing customers left, right and centre through no choice of their own. Please tell us what you think. Come and, pass a comment. If you don't agree with us, if you do agree with us, we don't mind. We just want to join the conversation.
They might just think we're a pair of tight skinflints who should just cough up our 20 grand like everyone else.
Trust me, if I'd had 20 grand for that 1968 Speedmaster, I probably would have done it and dealt with the consequences later. And on that bombshell, thank you very much. Once again, please subscribe to the channel and we'll see you soon.